Berlin, late spring, 1944. In a concrete room beneath Tirpitz-Sufer, 3 men studied a wall of reports. Names, locations, agent code names pinned across occupied Europe Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence, had eyes everywhere. Or so they believed. The light was gray, the air thick with cigarette smoke and ink. One officer tapped a file marked classified. Another checked the dates. Everything matched, every signal confirmed. Every agent reporting exactly what Berlin expected to hear. They thought their network was flawless. But what they were reading wasn't intelligence. It was a script. And London had written every word. The room smelled like old paper and stale coffee. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. Shadows stretched across maps of Britain, southern ports, airfields, troop concentrations, all marked by agents in the field. Agent Tate, Agent Brutus, Agent Treasure, dozens more. Each one sending signals from England, each one trusted, each one paid. The Abwehr officers moved between desks, cross-referencing decoded transmissions. A typewriter clattered in the corner. Someone muttered coordinates. Another circled a town on the map. Dover, Calais, Pas de Calais. Every report pointed there. The invasion would come there. It had to. One officer leaned back, exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. Our network in England is the best we have. Another nodded. They've never failed us. Outside, the city rumbled under distant air raids. Inside, the intelligence flowed. Clean, consistent, convincing. But across the channel, in a mansion outside London, 23 German agents sat in British custody. And they were all still transmitting. For 3 years, the Abwehr had built what they believed was an unbreakable spy network across Britain. Agents recruited before the war. Sleeper cells activated after Dunkirk operatives parachuted in under cover of night. By 1944, they had over 24 active sources on British soil. Agent Garbo alone, Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spanish national, commanded a supposed network of 27 sub-agents. He reported troop movements, supply shipments, invasion preparations. His intelligence was so detailed, so precise, that Berlin awarded him the Iron Cross. He had never set foot in Britain. Every report he sent was fiction, written in London, approved by MI5. But the Abwehr didn't know that. They believed Garbo. They believed Tate, a Danish agent transmitting from a safe house in Hertfordshire. They believed Treasure, a French woman sending signals from Bristol. Every single one had been captured, turned, controlled. The British called it Operation Double Cross. And it worked because the Germans never questioned the one thing they relied on most: their own system. When an agent's information matched another agent's report, it was considered verified. When 2 sources confirmed the same troop location, it became fact. What the Abwehr didn't realize was that all the sources were reading from the same script. The British weren't hiding the truth. They were feeding it. And Berlin swallowed every lie. Then came June 6th, 1944. The Allies landed at Normandy. Not Calais, not Dover, not the Pas de Calais where every German agent had sworn the invasion would strike. In the Abwehr headquarters, confusion turned to disbelief. The first reports came through at dawn. Airborne drops, beach landings, 5 sectors, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. An officer grabbed a telephone. Another pulled files from the cabinet. Someone shouted for the latest intelligence summaries. And then they began to compare. What the agents had reported. Garbo. 1st U.S. Army Group massing in Kent. 50 divisions. Invasion target. Pas-de-Calais. Timing. Mid-July. Brutus. Heavy activity around Dover. Troop convoys moving east. Calais remains primary objective. Tate. Observed Sherman tanks near Folkestone. Estimated 150-plus landing craft in Thames estuary. What actually happened? Normandy assault. 156,000 troops. 5 beaches. 0 advance warning from agents in place. Calais, quiet. Dover, quiet. Pas-de-Calais, untouched. 1st U.S. Army Group, a phantom. Inflatable tanks. Fake radio traffic. It never existed. The room went silent. Someone said, "Check the reports again." They did. Every agent had been wrong. Not partially wrong, not delayed, completely wrong. But worse, every agent had been wrong in the same way. Same phantom army, same fake ports, same false timeline. One officer, younger than the rest, set down a stack of decoded messages. His voice was quiet, steady. What if they didn't fail us? The others looked up. What if they were never ours to begin with? A pause, long enough to hear the clock ticking on the wall. Another officer shook his head. Impossible. We verified each one. Cross-checked their intelligence. Some of these agents have been reporting for years. And what have they been reporting? Silence. Exactly what we wanted to hear. The implications began to settle. If one agent had been turned, it was a failure. If 2 had been compromised, it was a disaster. But if all of them, every single source in Britain, had been feeding coordinated disinformation for years, then the Abwehr hadn't just lost its intelligence network. It had been used. Every troop movement they thought they knew. Every invasion plan they thought they'd uncovered. Every strategic decision they'd made based on British intelligence. All of it had been controlled. The British hadn't stopped German spies. They had become them. The officer who spoke was named Alexis von Roen, head of Foreign Armies West, the man responsible for evaluating all intelligence on Allied forces. He stood at the map, stared at the pins, the red marks across England, each one representing an agent, each one a source he had trusted. He reached up, pulled one pin from the wall. Garbo. Then another. Brutus. Another. Treasure. The pins clattered onto the table. Someone started to protest. "Sir, we can't just assume." Von Roena turned. His face was gray. Hollow. "Assume?" His voice barely above a whisper. "We don't need to assume. Look at the pattern." He spread the files across the desk. Months of reports, all pointing to Calais, all describing the same phantom army, all reinforcing the same lie. They didn't turn one agent. They turned all of them. And they did it so carefully that we never noticed. Another officer, older, shook his head. But the information was good. We confirmed movements. We tracked divisions. We We confirmed what they wanted us to confirm. Von Roenu's voice cracked. Every piece of intelligence that seemed independent? It wasn't every source that verified another source. They were all reading from the same playbook. He picked up a transmission from Garbo, dated May 28th, 1944. First U.S. Army Group ready. Patton in command. 50 divisions. Target, Calais. Then another, from Brutus. Same date. Confirmed. FUSAG operational. Calais sector primary objective. A third. Treasure. June 1st. Dover convoys increased. Invasion imminent. Calais. 3 independent sources. Von Roena said quietly. 3 confirmations. We thought it was verification. He set the papers down. It was choreography. The room had gone cold. One of the junior analysts spoke, his voice shaking. If they've controlled our network for this long, then everything we know about British strength, about American deployments, about invasion plans. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Von Roena nodded slowly. Everything we know is what they wanted us to know. Someone asked the question no one wanted to answer. How long? Von Roena looked at the files. Some dated back to 1941, to 1940, to before the war even began. From the start, he said. From the very beginning. The magnitude of it settled like ash. Not a failure of intelligence, not a lapse in security. A deception, systematic, total, years in the making. The British hadn't infiltrated the Abwehr. They had replaced it. Every decision made on British intelligence, every strategic assumption, every troop deployment, every defensive position, every operational priority. All based on lies. And the worst part? The lies had been good. So good that Berlin had built its entire defensive strategy around them. So good that when the real invasion came, Germany's best divisions were 200 miles away, waiting for an attack that would never come. Von Roena sat down, put his head in his hands. Someone asked if they should send a report to Berlin. He laughed, short, bitter. And tell them what? That we've been reading enemy propaganda for 3 years and calling it intelligence? That every agent we paid, every source we trusted, every network we built was a British operation? He looked up. His eyes were empty. They won't believe it. And even if they do, he gestured to the map. To Normandy, where Allied forces were already ashore. It doesn't matter anymore. That might be too late. Was too late. The system had been perfect. That was the problem. The Abwehr's intelligence network wasn't destroyed by accident. It was dismantled by design, piece by piece, agent by agent, and then rebuilt. It started in 1940. When Germany prepared to invade Britain, the Abwehr sent dozens of agents across the channel. Fishermen, refugees, businessmen. Sleeper cells activated from before the war. MI5 was waiting. They had broken the Abwehr codes. They knew the agents were coming. They knew their names, their cover stories, their radio frequencies. Every single one was arrested within hours of arrival. But MI5 didn't execute them, didn't imprison them, didn't publicize the captures. Instead, they made an offer. Work for us, or die. Most agreed. some out of fear, some out of ideology, a few because they never believed in the mission to begin with. The British called them double agents. But that term didn't capture the scale of what happened next. Because MI5 didn't just turn the agents. They ran them, controlled every transmission, crafted every report, coordinated every lie. An agent captured in Scotland would send messages written by British intelligence officers in London. A radio operator in Wales transmitted scripts approved by MI5's double-cross committee. Even the timing of the messages, the pauses, the errors, the call signs, were choreographed to seem authentic. Berlin never suspected, because the intelligence was good enough. Not too perfect, not too convenient, just accurate enough to seem real. When Tate reported a factory in Birmingham, the British made sure a factory existed there. When Garbo described troop movements, MI5 fed him real unit numbers, units that were resting, refitting, or already redeployed. The lies were wrapped in truth, and the Abwehr had no way to verify them, because verification required independent sources. But there were no independent sources. Every agent in Britain was controlled, every network compromised, every transmission monitored. The British hadn't just infiltrated the Abwehr's intelligence system. They were the system, and they used it brilliantly. When the Allies began planning the invasion, MI5 understood that Germany would look for patterns. They would compare reports, cross-check sources, try to find the truth. So the British gave them a pattern. They created a fictional army, 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG. Phantom divisions, inflatable tanks, fake radio chatter, and they had every double agent reported. Garbo saw Fusag in Kent. Brutus confirmed it in Essex. Treasure reported convoys near Dover. The reports came from different agents, using different channels, at different times. But they all told the same story. Berlin saw the consistency. They saw the confirmation. They saw verification. What they didn't see was the script. The Abwehr's entire intelligence process, designed to catch lies, became the mechanism that spread them. Because the system assumed that if multiple independent sources reported the same thing, it must be true. But the sources weren't independent. They never had been. By June 1944, the Abwehr had built its entire understanding of Allied strength, Allied intentions, Allied invasion plans on information provided by double agents. They had positioned divisions based on those reports, fortified ports based on those warnings, held reserves based on those assessments. When von Roene looked at the files that day in Berlin, he wasn't just seeing intelligence failure. He was seeing the architecture of defeat. A system so thoroughly compromised that it couldn't be fixed, couldn't be salvaged, couldn't be trusted ever again. Because once you realize your intelligence network has been feeding you lies for years, you don't know what's true anymore. You don't know what's real. You don't even know what you don't know. And in war, that's not just dangerous. It's fatal. The consequences unfolded swiftly. On June 6th, while Allied forces stormed Normandy, Hitler refused to release his armored reserves. He believed, because his intelligence told him, that Normandy was a feint, that the real invasion was still coming at Calais. He believed it because Garbo told him so. Even after the landings, the double agent sent an urgent message to Berlin. Normandy is a diversion. The main assault will hit Pas-de-Calais within days. Do not move the 15th Army. Berlin listened. The 15th Army, 19 divisions, 250,000 men, remained in place, waiting for an invasion that would never come. By the time Hitler realized the truth, the Allies had secured their beachhead. Reinforcements were pouring in. The Atlantic Wall was breached. Germany's best chance to throw the invaders back into the sea had passed. Not because of superior Allied firepower, not because of tactical brilliance, because Berlin trusted its spies. And its spies belonged to London. Von Roani tried to warn his superiors, tried to explain that the intelligence network was compromised, that every report from Britain should be considered suspect. He was ignored, then reassigned. Later, he was implicated in the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. He was executed in October 1944. The Abwehr was dissolved shortly after, folded into the SS, its files buried, its officers scattered. And Garbo? Juan Pujol Garcia, the Spanish double agent who convinced Hitler to hold his reserves at Calais, was awarded the Iron Cross by Germany in 1944, and the Member of the Order of the British Empire by Britain the same year. The only man in World War II to receive decorations from both sides. He lived quietly in Venezuela after the war, changed his name, disappeared. He died in 1988. The man who lied so well, he changed the course of history. The lesson wasn't just about intelligence. It was about trust. Germany built a system designed to find truth, a network of agents, a process of verification, a bureaucracy of analysis. But they forgot one thing. A system is only as reliable as the information it's built on. And if the foundation is false, everything above it collapses. In war, even perfect systems can be turned into weapons. Even the truth can be used to tell a lie. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one you can see. It's the one you've already invited inside. Berlin, March 1943. Late afternoon light cuts through cigarette smoke. Albert Speer stands over a table in the Reich Ministry of Armaments. Reports lie scattered before him. American production figures, typed on thin paper, marked secret. The numbers seem impossible. He reads them once, then again. The room is silent except for a clock ticking on the wall. An aide stands near the door. He does not speak. Speer sets the paper down slowly. His hands are steady, but something has changed in his eyes. They thought they had understood the war. But what they saw changed everything. The corridor outside is empty. No voices, no footsteps. Just the faint hum of Berlin beyond the windows. Streetcars clang in the distance. Factories still run their evening shifts. Inside, the air feels heavier. Coffee sits cold in porcelain cups. No one has touched them in an hour. A map of the Eastern Front hangs on the wall. Pins mark divisions stretched from Leningrad to the Caucasus. Another map shows the Atlantic red ink marks where ships have sunk. But now, this report. It sits on the table like a judge's verdict. The typewriter has gone silent. The assessment is complete. Speer's assistant stands by the window. He looks out at the gray sky. He does not ask questions. There are no questions left. The numbers have already spoken. Somewhere in the building, a telephone rings once, then stops. The war continues. But in this room, something is quietly broken. For 2 years, Berlin had believed in a simple idea. America was vast, but distance made it weak. Its factories were far from the battlefield safe, yes, but also slow. German intelligence had reported in 1941 that American industry was built for peace, not war. It would take years to change. Even into 1942, the reports remained confident. America had resources, but it lacked discipline. It had money, but not focus. It had workers, but not soldiers. And most importantly, it had never fought a total war. Germany, by contrast, had been preparing since 1936. The Wehrmacht had conquered Poland in weeks, France in months. German engineering was superior. German steel was harder. German tactics were faster. When American troops first landed in North Africa in late 1942, they struggled. They were green, poorly organized, easily defeated at Kasserine Pass. The conclusion seemed obvious. America could send men, but it could not send victory. Berlin's planners calculated that by mid-1943, American production would slow down. Factories would overheat. Supply chains would break. Political will would weaken. The logic was clean. The data seemed to support it. Officers nodded in agreement. Maps were redrawn with confidence. But beneath the triumph, the first cracks had already formed. Then came the reports. Not propaganda, not guesses. Real intelligence, captured documents, reconnaissance photos, neutral observers from Switzerland and Sweden. The numbers were staggering. Aircraft production, January 1943 alone, 5,000 planes. That is more aircraft in 1 month than Germany built in all of 1939. Fighters, bombers, transports, not prototypes. Combat-ready machines rolling off assembly lines in Michigan, California, Texas. Picture 5,000 aircraft filling the sky. Enough to darken the horizon over an entire country. Tank production, 2,000 Shermans every month. Not the best tank, true. German engineers knew that. But 2,000. Every 30 days, compare that to Germany's 600 Panthers and Tigers combined. And most of those still broke down in the field. Naval construction, Liberty ships. Welded together in sections, mass-produced like automobiles. One ship completed every 8 hours at peak efficiency, imagine. While you sleep through one night, another cargo ship slides into the ocean. Faster than U-boats could sink them. Germany's entire navy had launched 1,200 vessels in 3 years of war. America launched 2,700 merchant ships in 1943 alone. Steel production. America produced 80 million tons every year. Germany, 20 million, and falling. Even the Soviet Union, invaded and burning, still produced 10 million tons, and the gap was vast. Picture it as a mountain of steel. America's mountain 4 times higher than Germany's. Oil. The United States produced 60% of the world's petroleum. 60%. Germany had synthetic fuel plants. They were expensive. They were slow. They produced only a fraction of what the Wehrmacht needed. Every liter burned in a Panzer could not be replaced. Every liter used in a Stuka was 1 liter closer to empty. The Americans, meanwhile, were swimming in oil. Texas alone produced more than all of Europe combined. Manpower, 12 million Americans under arms by 1943. Germany had already mobilized nearly every man. There were no reserves left. The occupied territories provided labor, but not soldiers. The Eastern Front consumed 200,000 German casualties every month. Replacements arrived. But they were boys, poorly trained, equipped with outdated rifles. And then, the most devastating number. Lend-Lease. supplies pouring into the Soviet Union by convoy and rail, 15,000 aircraft, 7,000 tanks, 350,000 trucks, 14 million pairs of boots. The Red Army was not just fighting anymore. It was being fed, clothed, and transported by American factories. Imagine an entire army moving on wheels stamped "Made in Detroit." Berlin requested a new assessment. The response came quickly. Typed pages marked "Most urgent." The conclusion was 2 sentences. The United States has shifted to total war production ahead of schedule. Current output is sustainable and will likely increase. No one spoke. The silence was total. And in that silence, truth becomes undeniable. Albert Speer sits alone in his office. The report lies open before him. Outside, the city hums. Trams rattle past. Workers move through the March evening. Inside, only the clock makes sound. He lights a cigarette. The smoke rises slowly. It hangs in the fading light from the window. He has spent 2 years building Germany's war machine. He has streamlined factories, rationalized production, increased output by 300% in tanks, 200% in aircraft. He has been celebrated, promoted, trusted by the Führer himself. And yet, these numbers. He calculates in his head. Germany produces 25,000 aircraft per year. The United States, 96,000. Germany builds 19,000 tanks per year. America, 29,000 Shermans. Add the Stuarts, the tank destroyers, the self-propelled guns. The figure climbs past 40,000. But it is not just quantity. It is the system behind it. American factories operate in 3 shifts, day and night. They are untouched by bombing, uninterrupted by sabotage, fed by railroads that span an entire continent. There are no bottlenecks, no shortages, no slowdowns. The assembly lines run 24 hours a day, and they do not stop. Speer looks at the map on his wall. The blue arrows representing Allied forces are still small, confined to Italy, to the edges of North Africa. But those arrows are backed by factories in Detroit, Pittsburgh, Seattle. Behind each division is a convoy. Behind each convoy is a port. Behind each port is a continent that cannot be bombed, cannot be blockaded, cannot be reached. He thinks of the Ruhr Valley, of Essen, Düsseldorf, Dortmund, blackened by RAF raids, operating at half capacity. He thinks of the oil refineries in Romania, the only fuel source left, already under threat from Soviet advances. He thinks of the Eastern Front, where entire armies are melting into snow and ash, and there are no reserves to replace them. The Germans still have superior tanks, the Panther, the Tiger, engineering marvels, but there are only hundreds. The Americans have thousands of Shermans inferior, yes, but so many that it no longer matters. A superior tank means nothing if you can only field 1 for every 10 of the enemies. He thinks of history, of 1914, of the Kaiser's generals who believed France would fall in 6 weeks. He thinks of Napoleon, who conquered all of Europe but could not conquer distance. And now, this, a war that was supposed to be swift, surgical, decisive, has become a war of production, of factories, of supply chains. And in that kind of war, Germany is not losing. Germany has already lost. He stubs out the cigarette. The ash crumbles into the tray. He does not call for his aides. He does not write a memo. He simply sits, staring at the numbers, understanding what they mean. He knew it then. Not might be lost, was lost. The failure was not on the battlefield. It was structural. It was built into the system from the beginning. It was inevitable. Germany's economy had been designed for a short war. Blitzkrieg was not just military strategy. It was economic necessity. Strike fast. Seize resources, force surrender before your own reserves run out. Poland fell in weeks, France in months. Each victory fed the next. Captured fuel, stolen steel, seized factories. The war paid for itself. But the Soviet Union did not fall. Britain did not surrender. And when America entered the war, the entire premise collapsed. American industry was not just large. It was built differently. Henry Ford had pioneered assembly line production 20 years earlier. By the 1940s, every major American company understood mass production, standardized parts, interchangeable components. A car factory in Michigan could become a tank factory in 3 weeks. A locomotive plant could build aircraft engines in 2 months. The entire economy was flexible, modular, scalable. Germany, by contrast, still built weapons like craftsmen. Tanks were made in small batches, each one slightly different. A Panzer from 1941 could not use the same parts as a Panzer from 1943. Maintenance became a nightmare. Every repair required specialized tools. Every breakdown meant waiting for custom parts. The new designs, Tiger, Panther, King Tiger, were masterpieces engineering perfection. And that was the problem. Perfection takes time. Worse, Germany's workforce was breaking apart. By 1943, millions of men were at the front. Factories relied on forced labor, prisoners of war concentration camp inmates, occupied civilians. They worked slowly. They sabotaged when they could. They had no reason to build well. Meanwhile, American factories were staffed by volunteers, men and women who believed in the cause, who were paid fairly, who competed for production bonuses. The resource situation was catastrophic. Germany had coal, but almost no oil. Synthetic fuel plants produced 6 million tons per year, enough for peacetime, disastrous for war. Every liter burned in a tank was a liter gone forever. America, by contrast, was drowning in oil. One state, Texas, produced more petroleum than the entire German Reich. And then, strategic bombing. British and American bombers were destroying German cities, yes. But more importantly, they targeted factories, rail hubs, oil refineries. By late 1943, German production was still increasing. But it was increasing slower than the destruction. Losses outpaced replacements. The machine was consuming itself. There was no backup plan, no reserve economy, no hidden frontier. Germany had already mobilized everything it had. The occupied territories were bled dry. There were no more factories to build, no more workers to draft, no more steel to forge. The system had reached its limit, and it was not enough. The Americans, meanwhile, were just warming up. Factories that opened in 1942 were still expanding. New shipyards were under construction, aircraft plants were doubling in size. The production curve was not flattening. It was accelerating, inevitable, irreversible, systemic. By the end of 1943, the gap was visible everywhere. In the Atlantic, U-boats were being hunted to extinction. Once they had terrorized the seas. Now they were prey. New destroyers arrived every week, equipped with radar, with sonar. Dönitz could not replace his submarines fast enough. The wolf packs dissolved. Convoys sailed unmolested. The ocean belonged to the Allies. In the skies over Germany, the bomber streams grew thicker every month. In 1942, the RAF sent hundreds. In 1943, the Americans added thousands. By 1944, raids would involve 1,000 aircraft at a time. Picture it. 1,000 bombers covering the sky like a metal thunderstorm. The Luftwaffe, stretched across 3 fronts, could not stop them. German pilots flew until they died. There were no replacements. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army counterattacked, not with courage alone, but with American trucks, American radios, American rations. Lend-Lease did not win the war for the Soviets, but it kept them in the fight. Every Soviet offensive rolled forward on wheels stamped "Made in Detroit." In Italy, then France, then Germany itself. American and British armies advanced, not because they were braver, but because they were supplied. Fuel flowed without end. Ammunition arrived on schedule. Reinforcements came in endless waves. Logistics became destiny. Albert Speer would later testify at Nuremberg. He said Germany lost the war the moment America entered it. But that was not quite accurate. Germany lost the war the moment it failed to understand what America could become. The calculations had been made in 1941. Based on 1930s data, no one imagined that a democracy divided by politics could mobilize so completely. No one believed that a nation an ocean away could become the arsenal of the world. But it did. And in doing so, it rewrote the rules of modern war. The lesson was written in steel and oil and blood. Wars are not won by the best soldiers. They are won by the side that can still field soldiers when the other side cannot. Wars are not won by superior tactics. They are won by superior production. Berlin realized it too late. The gap had already opened, and no genius, no engineering, no miracle weapon could close it. Wars are not lost in battle. They are lost in decisions made long before.